Alright, what's up, guys? We are back here with our second Stephen King review, and again, if you didn't catch my review of A Good Marriage, I'm going to be reviewing every one of Stephen King's adapted movies, not including the miniseries. I'll do a different series on his miniseries, but right now we're looking at all of his movies that were adapted, and the first one that I started out with was Stephen King's A Good Marriage. Now we are looking at Apt Pupil. This came out in 1998. It has quite a few recognizable characters in it. Now, most of the actors, I can't remember any of the actors' names. I'm very bad with names, as much as you know. I do know that a character, there is a miniseries that Stephen King did with about 12 episodes, and it's called Kingdom Hospital. And the head doctor of the hospital in that is in this. The guy that plays Magneto in the X-Men movies is in this. And the tech guy, the black guy from Terminator 2 is in this. The tech guy. And this was about 6 years after Terminator 2. But I gotta say, I hadn't seen this before a couple hours ago. This movie is an hour and 51 minutes. I'm gonna go ahead and say it. A lot of people disagree. It's got a 53% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 6.7 out of 10 stars, but I really think that is an awful rating for this movie. This is an underrated masterpiece, in my opinion. And I never read the book, but this movie had so much atmosphere with it. And I think it may get an A+ for me because, in my opinion, it's a very underrated masterpiece. That's what I'm going to call it from now on. Because this is one of those Stephen King stories that isn't based off of a killer or a monster. This one is based off of something entirely creative. And when I go through the plot, you'll see what I mean. This movie is just intense as hell during getting close to the ending of it. The ending is something to behold. It gets intense as hell the last half an hour of this movie. I tell you, this was a pleasant thrill ride for me. I highly enjoyed this. I'm probably going to give it an A+. Oh. So, Apt Pupil. So, it's about this kid named Todd. And he, this kid, Todd, he lives in this small rural neighborhood. It's got a bunch of houses around it. It's a regular neighborhood. And he eventually starts it starts out he's having this Holocaust course in his history class, and he gets really fucking fascinated with the Nazis. And I mean, not in a historical standpoint, he respects their opinions. No, he's not a skinhead. He's it's hard to explain. There's a lot of foreshadowing in this movie, and there's a lot of deeper meaning storytelling in this. This movie plot line is very complex, and it's definitely not a movie for people that don't want to think a lot. There is a lot of deeper meaning in this movie. Symbolism. Just deeper meaning in general. That's what makes it good. And god damn it, can I talk about the score? The score of this movie. It fits so perfectly. It's like watching... It's kind of like the score from Schindler's List. It's very, very dramatic. And I really feel like it fits the scenes that they put it in. So, he gets this Holocaust course and he starts getting interested in the Nazis. He's not really respecting their opinions at this point, but he's starting to be interested in them. So he finds this one guy named like Kleiser or something, and he's like this SS general, and which is that guy in the background. Then he finds this old man in his neighborhood, and guess what? It's the dude. It's the actual Nazi guy, and this is played by Magneto from the older Magneto from X-Men, not the young one. Sorry, Michael Fassbender. That would be the, in case you people don't know who Michael Fassbender is, Fossman or whatever. I've heard it pronounced 100 ways from the moon, but Michael Fassbender is what I call him. And he plays the younger Magneto. There's two Magnetos. There's an old one and then there's a young one. We get the old one in this movie, which is equally as good. I like him equally. So he starts getting in this guy's house, and this kid threatens to take him to the police because he's a Nazi fugitive, and he changed his name and stuff. So then the ex-Nazi general decides, all right, what do you want? And this kid tells him that he wants him to tell him everything he did in World War II because he was there. This is where the movie starts getting tense. There's a couple jump scares in this too that actually, one or two of them got me. This is a unique ass movie. I don't even know how to express it. So he starts telling this story, and this one actually kind of set me off a little bit. I was just kind of disturbed by this little story he had. So he was basically explaining like the gas chamber thing to this kid, and he said it would usually take to like half an hour to an hour for them all to die. And the kid asks, and then he starts telling them that they would climb on top of each other to breathe out of the vents for air that wasn't there. And then the kid asked about the children, and he's like, oh, they died at the bottom because they couldn't climb up. This ex-Nazi guy is just got an ocean of disturbing stories for you. Then he tells us this story of this one time too much oxygen got into the gas tank, and the people had to suffer in there for 2 hours in that gas, and then they went in there with rifles and shot them up. This movie is so fucked up on so many levels as well. It was pretty ballsy making a movie about this. I mean, I understand if it's just a Stephen King book. Stephen King writes weird shit all the time. Nobody cares. That's just what he does. Everybody knows that he writes weird shit, and everybody knows that he crosses the line way too many times. Mr. Mercedes, I'm looking at you. Specifically the book. I read it. That book is so fucked up. But, okay, I gotta say it. Why is Mr. Mercedes so fucked up? This is a book by Stephen King, and it's a part of a trilogy. I never read the other two, but I read Mr. Mercedes, which is the first in the trilogy. It's about this detective that hunts down this terrorist / serial killer. Well, at the end of the movie, when this terrorist is about to get caught, he decides to strap disguise himself as a disabled person in a wheelchair, and this is why the book is fucked up. This is one of the reasons. There's 1,001 things in this book, but this is the biggest one for me. He decides to sit in this wheelchair and disguise himself as a disabled person and strap C4 inside of his piss bag. He wheels into this concert that's like a One Direction concert with thousands of 6 to 8-year-old girls in there, and he wheels himself right in the middle, and he's about to blow himself up and kill a bunch of 8-year-olds. That should make you not want to read it right off the bat. It was one of those books where I felt bad reading it because there's just so much graphic shit in it and it's just so disturbing. But I wanted to read it to figure out what happened. So I forced myself to nut my way through that book. God damn it. But all joking aside and all stories aside, Stephen King has always written some pretty controversial shit, in my opinion. A lot of people would disagree with me, but I think a lot more people would agree with me that he's written some pretty fucked up shit. I gotta get a jacket here, I'm kind of cold. And that's why I don't like most of Stephen King's movies, because most of them are directed by him, and the way that the way that most of his movies are directed just don't mirror the way that he's written the book. I've always wanted to see a movie like this where it mirrors the book and how graphic it is. I've always wanted to see that. That's why I like the It remake. Carrie did it okay, and I enjoyed Christine too. Those hit the nail on the head pretty good, because I read both of those books. The Stand was alright. I wish they'd remake that though. But apt people. So he starts telling them these Nazi stories, and he's starting to fail school. So there's a point in this movie where this old man decides to help him with his school and disguise himself as his grandpa Victor. And he has dinner with Todd's parents, and they meet him. They find out that he's been hanging out with this old guy, but they don't know he's a Nazi. And there's an intense dinner scene in this. It's very subtle how they planned out this scene. So when he's having dinner with his family, and I love this part of the storytelling. When he's having dinner with his family, his grandpa looks at the old man and he's like, "What did you do during the war?" And the old man gave up his story. Told a fake story. But that whole time, I'm looking at Todd's actual grandpa, and this is before he disguises himself as Todd's grandpa. But he's looking at Todd's grandpa. I'm looking at Todd's grandpa, and he's just got this like dead mad face. Like, I swear to God, if my grandson's hanging out with this fucking Nazi. That was intense as hell. No, he got away with that. So then, in order to get his grades back up and not let his parents find out, he decides to disguise himself as Todd's grandpa. And he does, and he gets his grades back up. And then this scene happens. Todd buys the old man. Now, the old man at the beginning of the movie does not want to go back to his old ways. But Todd kind of breaks him out of his shell and turns him into a Nazi again. He buys him this Halloween costume that's an authentic Nazi SS general uniform. And he puts it on. And he kind of goes fucking nuts. He tries to shove a cat in the microwave in one scene. And there is a scene where he just tries to shove the fucking cat in the microwave. And this kid is also going crazy. This kid mashed a pigeon with a basketball. They're both kind of the ultimate evil duo. So then they decide, this kid's like underage, but the old man decides to break out a bottle of whiskey and share it with the kid because he passed school and he's about to have his graduation. And they start talking, and the kid starts getting mad at him because he's starting to get back in his old Nazi ways, which is not something he wanted. So he's like getting pissed off at him, but the old man's like, I am going to tell you a story of an old man who met a boy. He saw this boy as a student. And he started telling him that about this boy. He was a student, and it's kind of explaining him. And then he tells the kid about, he goes to grab a bottle opener from the cellar, which is on a shelf next to the staircase. So he decides to reach over step a little bit off onto the staircase to his basement. It's not the cellar yet. The cellar is below the basement, but he decides to step into the basement a little bit to grab the bottle opener. And the kid's thinking about pushing him down the stairs and making it look like an accident. But then he tells him, what if I told you the old man finally decided to make a 12-page essay on how he met this little kid? And he starts threatening him with this. And in the event of the man's death, he says that he put this essay into a lockbox at the bank. And in the event of his death, it would be opened and examined, exposing the kid and him as a Nazi general. So the kid started getting worried. So he decided to leave the old man alone because that's what the old man wanted. Old man was kind of going crazy. So one night he decides to go out and buy whiskey, and he takes it back to his house, but this homeless guy shows up and he wants to have a drink with him. Yes, this homeless guy randomly shows up and wants to have a drink with him. So he takes him inside, and they start getting hammered, but then the Nazi general is getting all weird. So he starts getting this guy super hella drunk, and he pulls a knife out and stabs the fucker in the back, and then shoves him down the stairs. Then he calls Todd over and says that he needs him to read a letter for him. So he comes over. Well, he calls Todd's mom and says that he needs him to read a letter. And then Todd comes over to the phone, and he finds out that he just almost killed this guy. And yes, this is the part that I didn't tell you guys. He started having a heart attack because I guess he ran around too much trying to kill this guy. So he's having a heart attack right now. So he needs them to clean up the mess. So he goes over to help him. He calls an ambulance, hides the body, and cleans everything up. Cleans everything up, and then Todd visits him at the hospital later in the movie. We're getting near the end now. And he decides to visit him at the hospital. And he stays there a while. And the old man tells him that there was never any essay. He was lying. He needed to make sure he was okay, and so his secret wouldn't get out. So he leaves, and before Todd leaves, he gets stopped because there is another old man in the room with that old man. And I gotta say this, earlier in the movie when this Nazi general guy was impersonating Todd's grandpa, he went to see the school counselor, because the reason he did that is because the teacher sent the note with all the grades on it. So he was going to disguise himself as his grandpa so he can help him get the grades up. And so he fools the school counselor. So the school counselor thinks that that's his actual grandpa. And we'll get to that later. This kid's like super fucked up too. So just remember that. So he gets stopped by this old man that's also in his room, in the Nazi general's room. Before Todd leaves, he gets stopped by the other man that's in the room. And he's an old man. He's in his hospital bed. And he's got a Germanish accent too. And he starts asking him about the man next to him. And he gets more interested in him. Once the kid leaves, he decides to get up and look at him, see if he recognizes him. Well, takes one look at this guy, and this is another very good directed scene. The score in it was just used perfectly. Hold on. Oh my god. Sorry. So he takes one look at this guy and he starts flipping his shit. And he runs out into the hall to find a nurse and he collapses in this nurse's arms. And while he collapses, there's a slow motion shot of his arm falling down and it's got his Jewish numbers on it. And I'm like, oh shit. Next thing you know, it's the next morning and this Nazi general guy wakes up and there's two FBI guys and the leader of Jerusalem. I'm just like, oh shit. Now the kid cleaned up the body and stuff, so they're not going to find him out for that. But here's the bad thing. What happens when the counselor sees that that guy is on the news now? We're about to get to the ending of this. So he gets caught and the old man decides to commit suicide and unplug his cords and stuff while he's in the hospital, and he has a heart attack. And then the counselor comes to his house later, and he brings in the newspaper with the old man's face on it. And he asks him, what the hell is this? So he demands to see his parents. So then we get the end of the movie. Todd looks at him. Earlier in the movie, the old man was telling him about the lockbox, and he was like, once that paper goes out, it won't go away for you, and it won't go away for your family. It'll never go away. That'll always be a curse on your family that you knew a Nazi general. So he decides to recite that to this counselor guy, because what the counselor did is when he was still in school, he gave him his home phone number because he's a counselor, and he gave him his home phone number, which he's not supposed to do. And he also fixed his grades. Helped him fix his grades. So he turned that around and he's like, he was saying like he's a pedophile or something. And he threatened him with that, and the counselor backed off, and he's like, you take me down, I'm taking you down with me. It'll never go away, and it'll never leave. It'll always stay with you. And I'm just like, then the movie fades to black. Well, the movie then ends after a German song pops on the radio. It's like a woman singing in German. And a freeze frame face of the dead old man in the hospital room. And that is the ending of An Apt Pupil. God damn it. What the hell? This movie was an extreme treat, and I'm going to give it an A+. This is a underrated masterpiece, in my opinion, as I said before. Definitely go check this movie out. So remember to leave a comment, like, and subscribe.